Welcome to Wales Tech Week 2021. Thank you to our partners. Enjoy the session.
Good morning and a very warm welcome to the opening session of today's Pillar Stage, the theme of which is about building a career in tech. I'm Avril Lewis, I'm the Managing Director of Technology Connected, the network for the technology industry in Wales and the creator behind Wales Tech Week. And I'm delighted to be joined today by my guests to discuss, do we have to follow traditional routes into tech? My esteemed guests today are Maude, the Director of Digital, Data and Technology at Companies House, Rosie Hines, Project Manager, Data Scientist at Tata Steel UK, James Harvey, Division Director for the Academy and DevOpsGroup, Rowena Morgan, Programme Manager, Graduate Programme Wales at the Welsh Contact Centre Forum, and Shannon, a graduate at the Principality Building Society. So let's just set the concept, because today we will have many young people joining us, some of whom, in fact, may have already had their GCSE results this week. So I think the timing couldn't be more apt as to what we're discussing today. So we may have young people joining us. We may have people who are tech curious, individuals who are looking to change careers, or those who, unfortunately through the COVID pandemic have either been furloughed or have lost their jobs as a result of a declining industry which has occurred through COVID. So 3 really important sessions that we're covering. This first one, I think, is really interesting and generic because everybody sort of has a preconception of how one gets into a career. So we'll be looking at what the different alternative routes are that one can use to be able to join. Our second session is with Careers Wales, and they will be talking to employers on some of the specialist roles and paths into careers in tech. And the third session, late this afternoon, will be focusing on some of those traditional avenues to be able to get into careers in tech. So I think for everybody listening today, and the panel here, I'm sure will endorse what I have to say, that it's extremely important that we understand the employment landscape and that the employment landscape is continually changing. Pre-COVID, we were becoming very familiar with the concepts of automation and cybersecurity, for example. But what the COVID pandemic has most definitely emphasized is that technology is really enabling everything we do within our lives, whether it's our working environment, the way we're able to stay in touch with one another, also the way it's been transforming industries and sectors. Who'd have thought that you would have been having a video conference with your GP pre-COVID? So what we see, pre-COVID was very much an increasing demand for technology. Post-COVID, that has just completely grown exponentially. So here we are, technology and the need for technologists is not merely the domain of the IT department. Technology is completely ubiquitous, and the portfolio of skills that one will need for a future career will undoubtedly need to have technology somewhere within it. So I think what's really important is that we understand that the world of work is changing, the way we work is changing, how we work and where we work is changing. So the need for people to have good digital skills is only going to increase. And without that, our young people are going to be left behind because the demand is only accelerating. So I think on that sort of concept that we understand this growing demand for people with technology skills, what I'd like to do is come to my esteemed panel of guests, and I'm going to get a background from them to understand how they've got to where they are in their career so that everybody listening and watching can see that you don't necessarily need to come through the traditional route. And what we're also going to understand is what is it that employers are looking for when they want to be bringing people into their organisations. So, if I may, I'm going to start. A very warm welcome to Ross Maude. Delighted to have you with us. Ross, if I can start with you, if I may. Firstly, just give us a brief background on how you got to where you are today, and then to talk to us about what Companies House is doing and what you're looking for when you bring people into your organisation. Thank you.
Morning. Thank you, Avril. Yeah, absolutely. So probably a non-standard route slightly. So I did my degree in archaeology, so not a STEM subject. But what I did do, because this is some time ago now, pretending it's not, is I did do a postgraduate course in computing, which I got to do all of the great things around programming and databases. But then certainly when I was entering the kind of job market, it was, the first role was on service desk. So having got all of this kind of hard technical skills, I was mostly on the phone dealing with folk. And then from there, I kind of went through sort of Unix and database administration and infrastructure. And then at some point, I think I decided to, as much as I enjoyed the technical side of things, I wanted to combine technology with some leadership. And so I kind of went for some positions with more leadership and ultimately did an MBA, part-time MBA, which to be honest, I thought it was all full of those terrible self-help books from the airport bookshop, but actually it was really, really exciting going back to university and hanging out with some inquiring minds. So yeah, and I think that, and then it's just basically pushing yourself and looking for the roles you want. So that's kind of very quickly my background. So I never decided to do this job because this job didn't exist when I started. So it's staying curious, and I think that is probably what we look for when we're recruiting. So we've actually removed the requirement for a STEM degree to join our grad program because we talked yesterday, didn't we, about it bakes out quite a lot of diversity by doing that. And actually, I suppose what we're really looking for are our core values, which is about being adaptable, bold, and curious. So there's a role for everyone in creating great digital services. You don't have to be the person with the kind of matrix screen and the black and white text. You don't have to do that. There's a whole array of skills required to make these services work properly. And I think that's what we look for is people who can collaborate, who are curious, who are adaptable, who have the courage, their convictions to stand up for what they think is right and reach consensus with their teams.
Okay, I think that's really interesting. You mentioned your career to date, and I think one thing we must always mention is, your education and your learning doesn't finish when you leave school or B, you graduate. There is the continual professional development that we all need to continue to embark on, regardless of what age you are or what role you are. So thank you. I think really valuable point there. That's really interesting. Can I just move on to Rosie, please? Because I think we're going to go from, let's look at what's going on in the public sector, which Ross has just talked about. Let's go into, industry and, heavy industry, Rosie, because you work for Tata UK.
I do, yes.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into the role that you're doing and what your role is?
Yeah, of course. So my job title is Project Manager of Advanced Analytics, but what that really means is I work with a team of data scientists and we're the pioneering team actually in Tata Steel. We've been established for a couple of years now, and we're working on data science projects and problems all across our Port Talbot site specifically at the minute. My background is actually in mathematics, and I studied that at Swansea. And I was one of the first of my kind, we'll say, to join as a graduate from a mathematics background. You think of something like a steelworks as needing engineers and chemists and material scientists. I didn't know anything about steelmaking when I first joined, and you pick that up as you learn. And luckily, the graduate scheme that is in Tata Steel is very mature. And has a lot of good training material and resource to sort of bring people up to speed. So, in my mind, I thought I grew up in Port Talbot, and you see the steelworks on the horizon, and you think, oh, you must need engineering to be able to work there and all of these different things. But really now the skill set that we're after, and I think really similar to the point that Ross made, is people who are willing and people who want to learn. You know, we're now looking at, you know, when I look at my team of people, we all do data science now. We've got a doctor in material science. You know, he wasn't a coder, he didn't do data science before. You know, we had an engineer, a chemist, a couple of mathematicians, and we've all come in and we've gone through training material and we've upskilled ourselves, and now it's a level playing field. You know, we're all at the same point, and no longer are we looking at needing specific degrees to do specific areas. I think what we're now seeing more and more in Tata Steel, you know, at least the last couple of years, is there is a place for anyone if you've got an interest. You know, there's so much variety, and yeah, we really can find a place for anyone with any background.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'm going to pick up these points and come back, but I want to hear from the rest of the panelists first, if I may. So I'm going to come to James Harvey from DevOps, because you've got a really, what one would say, a traditional background, but what you're embarking on with DevOps and what you're doing at the moment is really outside of the norm.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's been my career from almost day one. As you said, ironically, I had quite a very traditional introduction into IT, studied for computer science because I wanted to be a coder. And the only reason that I chose that avenue at the time, which was like 15, 16 years ago now, was because it was just seen as the only way to get a career in tech. And I'm sure there were other avenues in, but it certainly wasn't something that was sort of broadcasted far and wide at the time. It was, if you want to go and be a coder, you need to go and do a comp science degree at the very minimal, and sort of take it from there. But then, similar to Ross, really, very early on in my career, I was very fortunate enough to get a job as a junior developer with a small startup, bleeding edge everything. And I learned about this little thing called Agile, which 15 years ago was next to non-existent. And I got really into it, so much so that I wasn't actually enjoying the coding side of my job, because it was so different in the commercial world to what you learn at university and what you do in your bedroom. It's completely different when you get into a commercial environment. So my career went on a massive sort of detour at that point, within the first sort of 18 months of working, to, you know, finding out about Agile, evangelizing a lot of the methodologies and frameworks that I'd learned about, and it worked out really well for me, because as Agile was maturing, I was maturing and able to kind of you know, join company to company and helping them adopt Agile, to the point where I started taking on training and education as a big part of my role. So very similar to Ross, you know, initially had a big fondness in being involved in the weeds, as it were, from a tech perspective, which is why I entered in the way that I did. But my career has gone, not that I'm obviously completely detached from the tech world now. We still train in tech and things like that, but yeah, very much not in the weeds of delivering tech on a daily basis anymore. And as you said, you know, working now with various different schemes, different programs, and some of our customers as well, to help open doors and opportunities for people to get a career in tech. From what I see nowadays, as good as the work that the institutions and universities do, there is still a huge gap between what's taught at academic level versus what's expected of people in a commercial world. And so we're working at the moment and looking at ways that we can, as I said, offer opportunities for people who maybe want a career in tech but don't want to go down, or don't have the means to go down a typical university route, which obviously I'm sure we'll come on to explore a bit later on.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make a note, please, for our audience. Our comments box is open. Very conscious, a lot of our panelists here are going to say some interesting things. If people have a question or a comment that they'd like to make, please, by all means, post it in the comments box, and I will do my very best to make sure that I can address it to our panelists. Thank you, James. Rowena, if I can introduce you, please, and find out a little bit about how you've got to where you are today. Before we then come on to Shannon, and then we'll come back to some of these non-traditional routes and these programs that people are putting in place. Good morning.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you, Avril. So I guess I'm a bit of an anomaly here, because I am a non-techie person, but I deal with graduate programs that take on technology graduates, etc. So my background very much economic development, inward investment, etc., which has led me to work with the financial services sector, predominantly in South Wales. So we run two quite major programs now, one supporting the financial services industry and a more recent fast track program, which really does try and accelerate graduates into data, AI careers and professions within the industry. And it's great to see we've got Shannon here today, who is one of those graduates on our current program. So, and guess in terms of the financial services sector, it's a really exciting time to be part of the industry at the moment. All our employers are looking at agile ways of working and scaling up business transformation. They're personalizing their customer experience through data analytics, AI and technology, and on all whilst dealing and complying with a quite heavily regulated environment. So my point from that is, I guess, that what they're looking for now from their future workforce are those skills that can help support that digital transformation across every role within the financial services sector, whether that's marketing through to risk, through to finance, etc. So we are really looking for graduates who can be part of this transformation and can, help these companies adapt and innovate quite rapidly. And adjust their business model and technologies. So really graduates who can think a little bit differently. We're looking for creativity. We're looking for grads who can be adaptive and particularly show resilience. But I guess in terms of the non-traditional routes into the industry, whereby a large majority of our graduates in our data program do come from a STEM background, we also have quite a large number that don't. So, and Shannon being one of them, actually. So we have graduates who've gone on to become very successful data scientists, who've come from a physiotherapy or a sports science background. So what we're really looking for is the skill set that's been developed through studying for a degree, whether that's psychology or whatever that might be, because it's that perhaps that understanding of statistics, that analytical ability. That's what we're really looking for in terms of the sort of technology programs that we run.
Thank you. That's some fascinating stuff there. We'll come back to explore more about that, but let's bring Shannon in. Good morning, Shannon. If you can give us an overview of your career to date into how you got to where you are, I think that would be really interesting for us because, as Rowena says, you are part of this programme.
Yeah, sure. So I went to John Moores University to do multimedia, and when I started there, I really just picked it because I liked it. I know we're meant to sort of have an idea of what we want to do as a career, but I didn't. Going through the course, there were a million different careers that I was thinking about, be it graphics design, animation. I had no idea really, but I just kept going. So then I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to do a sandwich year placement with PwC Research. I would advise any student to do any kind of placement year because this was whenever I got a bit of an insight to the working world. So I was with the data analytics team, and at this point I realized that it was not graphics, it was not animation that I wanted to do, it was data. So when I went back into my third year of uni, I was sort of like trying to think about a route of how I could get there, because I didn't even know if I would get accepted onto a data science master's, let alone if I wanted to go and do another degree, because obviously I know how important work experience is. So whenever this course came up that it was accepting people who necessarily didn't have a background in stats or in maths, and I could do a qualification and get work experience at the same time, it's a bit of a blessing for me. So yeah, I came in with a non-stats background, and yeah, like Rowena says, there's been a variety of people who do have a good background in it, and there's been a variety who don't. And don't get me wrong, obviously the people with a specific background might get it a little bit quicker, but I think the same kind of people, all really hardworking people who are willing to put in the work, and it's definitely shown. No one's falling behind on the course. It's been a lot of hard work, and I've been quite grateful to be in lockdown with no distractions from my friends, so I've actually been able to study. But yeah, no one's fallen behind. It's given me real like a basis of how I can go into another job with, yeah, I might not be a data scientist through and through, but I understand all the concepts, and yeah, it's given me a really good basis to work towards.
Thank you. And thank you to my panelists for the introduction. I think, for our audience, you can see here, we have such a diverse set of backgrounds coming into what is, the industry, and that's across public sector, private sector, financial services, heavy industry. You can see that the plethora of opportunities there are for people to be able to work in tech. So I just want to pick up on some of the things that have been said. Very obvious that we've had from our panelists here this morning is there's been a lot of talk about graduate, okay? And we want to be talking about, the alternative routes in, as opposed to coming through what I will call, a pipeline. And I find a pipeline an inappropriate term, because it is very much like, you're going to start here and you're going to go on that one direct route. And I'm very conscious that, what we've seen here is people coming at tech from all different avenues. So, Ross, if I may, if I can come back to you, you mentioned three things, and forgive me, I've got the two, but that was about collaboration and the curiosity. And you said there was another core skill that you look for. Can you give us some examples, within Companies House of people who are coming in, from the non-graduate route, and what it was that about those core skills that made you want to take those particular people? And what other avenues have you got for people to be able to come into Companies House?
Yeah, absolutely. So we recognised from a diversity perspective that we weren't getting enough diverse candidates through, and that's partly because we said STEM degree, and we talked about that yesterday, that there's, you're already fishing in a pool that's not diverse. So one of the things that we did do is we have a degree apprenticeship scheme. So you can join the apprenticeship scheme, and we will support you through a degree in the process of doing that. So it doesn't require a degree, and one of the reasons we focused on that is because it doesn't require going to university. And there might be socioeconomic groups for which going to university is too much of an overhead, so we're missing out on talent. So we started doing that, and we have selection days and a whole word of recruitment, and all of our kind of agile community were involved in setting up and supporting those. And we made sure that we had, again, diverse representation in those days, so that people could understand what it would be like to work for us. And that was really good, and we got through some great candidates from doing that. So that that's one route. So perhaps if you're crossing over or early in your career and you want to do something like that, then that degree apprenticeship scheme is open, and you'll get supported to a degree. I think the traditional route internally has been kind of from what we call the operations world. So kind of in our world is we look after all these incoming filings for Companies House. And there was a route kind of through what we called continuous improvement, so reviewing process structures and making sure they were being efficient. And kind of you went from continuous improvement. You could kind of go in as a junior business analyst, who then start working with the Scrum teams to build solutions to make the processes work. So it didn't require you to have probably not the right frame, but the kind of the hard engineering skills of actually writing and cutting code. But you need to know all about the ceremonies and how you collaborate and how you solve and how you represent a community who perhaps you've come from. And so that's sort of the internal route that we've had to support people into the, I wouldn't call it tech, it's the production of digital services. So maybe even the word tech sometimes makes you think it's got to be the hardcore kind of keyboard approach, or actually a lot of it's about combined collaboration and problem solving in a creative way. And so those are the things that we really look for when we're looking to bring folk on. And that continued curiosity. I still mess around on things like edx.org. I mean, no one would let me near live production at any time soon, thankfully. But there's just that interest in having a look, and I think that should be for everyone to have a nose around it. There's an immense amount of free content that people can have a look at and start thinking about areas that might be of interest to them.
Okay, thank you. Rosie, I mean, Tata, it's because you said British Steel, it was at the beginning. Tata, I mean, they are renowned for their sort of graduate development programs and their internal training. But how else can people get on or get into Tata? Particularly now, as I know it's transforming, and it's, the whole perception of, big steel industry. Yesterday, we had a great session from Tata on our manufacturing's main stage, and you were part of that, looking at how they are using, great tech, whether it be AI, whether it be data, robotics and automation, in transforming the way that we make steel. So, what else are they doing to be able to attract people in to come and work in, what is perceived as a traditional industry?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point there, the use of the word perceive, because I really think it is an age-old thing. It's such a traditional process, and that's the kind of the vision that we all have, of people literally out there hauling, which is still the case in some areas, but I think more and more now are we becoming new and shiny and using all these new methods. The good thing with Tata Steel, I already touched a little bit on the graduate program, and I don't want to spend too much time on that. But what we are able to do is pull in, that diversity piece. The biggest site in Wales is in Port Talbot. The demographic in Port Talbot, and I think that was touched upon a little bit, is, when you look at the socioeconomic spread, if we call it that, further and higher education attendance isn't always that high in these areas. There are apprenticeship schemes, higher apprenticeship schemes, all of these different methods of getting into Tata Steel. And actually, I think the great thing is, once, if we call it, your foot is in the door, the plant really is your oyster. We've got people working in the team that started off as apprentices way back when, and they've actually pulled themselves up. There's opportunity for education, sending people for degrees, and even higher than that, if that's what you desire. But I think the really good thing that brings it all together in Tata Steel, actually, that some people may not know about, is we've got something that we call Magnet, which is our Young Professionals Networking Society. And it's actually run by the young professionals, for the young professionals, and that is development, networking, because the thing about Tata Steel is your network is your basis, is your platform. I'm sure it's the same in many other companies, and through something like Magnet and the different entrepreneurial challenges we're a part of, and all of the local community work that we do, you're able to branch out and learn about things that really aren't in your field of vision, to be able to then know where you want to go to. And I think it's one of those where I've changed career path slightly. So when I joined, I wasn't in data science and analytics. I was looking at value and raw materials, which was quite technical. The opportunity came up and I heard about it and asked, I really want to be a part of that. And that's what happened. So it was really about knowing who to connect with, and something like Magnet, which again, I just don't think is as widely known, is a really nice thing to bring your graduates, your trainees, your apprenticeships and higher apprentices all sort of into one place.
Fascinating. It's great, because you're right. Outside we wouldn't know about this. So it's really important that we get an opportunity for our community to understand what many of our larger organizations are doing. And there's some fantastic work going on there. And I think, Wales Tech Week can really put a spotlight on what some incredible work some of our larger organizations are doing. I'm going to come to you, James, because we can focus very much on what our larger organizations are doing. But the point I made yesterday is, the industry in Wales is 80% SME and micro. And a great entrepreneurial spirit. But when you are an entrepreneur and you are a micro, you are wearing so many hats, and you don't have dedicated resources to be able to do as much outreach and engagement as one may want to do. DevOps has been very, very good at that. Can you give us more information with regard to what DevOps is doing? Because you have scaled tremendously, so you've gone on that journey. But what did you do, and what is it that you're still doing that can really attract people who are from that non-traditional route?
Yeah, I think, there's a few things. The first thing I want to sort of highlight and point out, and I try and do this every available opportunity, is, we've been talking about the skills gap and the shortage of candidates for a career in tech, not just in South Wales or in the UK, but in the world, really, for the last, ever since I've been working in industry. And I do feel like people have this kind of impression that gap is getting smaller year on year, and the reality is the gap is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because, as you said, Avril, as more and more companies start to scale, as more and more jobs are created, there is a bigger demand year on year for people with good tech skills. So the pipeline of people that we have just doesn't sustain that at the moment. Now, like any organization, we look and we run a graduate program. We look at universities. We have intern placements, year in industry and things like that. All sustainable and a great way of doing things. But we're really starting to look outside the box a bit now around how can we find other avenues of getting people into employment, but critically make it something that's sustainable as well. I mean, a lot of people turn to grad programs and intern programs because it is repeatable, it is sustainable, and you can kind of bank on so many people. But obviously there are only so many people doing degrees every year, and then you've got this huge pool of potential that exist out there that might not have the same opportunity to get a career in tech. And it's been said a few times on this call today, and it's not to undermine any of the learning that goes on as far as in colleges and universities and whatnot. But I think we can all agree that the learning you get once you get into industry is so much more relevant and accelerated from what you have previously. The other critical thing I think a lot of people don't really seem to factor into all this is we work in the quickest moving industry in the world. So technologies that we're teaching today are going to be out of date in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months time. So it doesn't matter if you've been working in the industry for 20 years, you're still going to be learning every month, every quarter, whatever it might be. And quite quickly, if you're new to the industry, within 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever it is, you're going to find that you're learning the same things that people who've been in the industry for so long have started who are also learning. So the key thing there is that it doesn't really matter, and Rosie mentioned it earlier on, it doesn't really matter when you get your foot in the door. The key thing is getting your foot in the door, and then it's all about what you do with the opportunity that you have. What we're trying to do is not only help our cause, because as you mentioned, we're scaling quite aggressively, and I firmly believe that the only way that SMEs can scale sustainably is to invest in people starting out their careers. I think people like grads, like people graduating from any sort of boot camp, are the only sustainable way companies are able to sort of grow with any sort of aggression. And so we have to do more in that space. So one of the programs that we're looking at, or that we're piloting now in South Wales, is the AWS Restart program. We're very proud to be the first organization bringing it into Wales, thanks to our partnership with AWS. And the program itself, in a nutshell, is all about taking people, like we've been discussing, with no background in IT whatsoever, some of them from undereducated backgrounds, underemployed backgrounds, people who've really got a passion for working in IT but didn't feel like they could actually pursue that career for reasons that maybe they didn't have a degree, or they felt like it was so overwhelming, this kind of, I'm starting from scratch and I've got to learn all this stuff to even get my foot in the door in the first place. So it's really aimed at those sorts of people. And the idea is they come in, they spend 12 weeks with us learning everything that they would need to start a career in tech. So we assume they've got no knowledge. We teach them things like Python, networking, security, agile, DevOps, and all of this is culminating up to their AWS Cloud Practitioner certification, which is the entry level from a cloud engineering perspective. And the idea is after 12 weeks, we will then help place them into a job within, in our case, within South Wales, trying to help the local South Wales tech industry, and ultimately allow them then to pursue that journey with a company in South Wales where their learning can continue and they can start contributing to active programs and projects. We're also working with local recruitment companies like Sadler Recruitment to try and bridge the gap here again between industry and learners. And I think it's really critical that we treat it as an end-to-end solution, so that we're not only helping re-educate people and reskill people, we're also helping them get the job at the end of it. And, you know, ultimately trying to do something about that skills gap, not just for ourselves, because there's, you know, we will absolutely be absorbing some of the talent that comes through these programs, but also for other companies in South Wales. You know, we're trying to create this pipeline that we've been discussing of very talented, very passionate people ready to start their career in IT. And, you know, I firmly believe that within 2 or 3 months worth of further investment, once they get into that job, they're going to be running with all the skills they need to carry on that career through. And it's game changing. You know, some of the people we've been speaking to, certainly some of the people from more undereducated backgrounds, people who didn't have an opportunity to go through from this career path, they had no idea that a career in tech, a career in IT was even possible for them. And you know, we do a lot of training in DevOps and cloud, and we typically work with professionals on a daily basis. But this is very different. It's not just reskilling people; it's potentially changing their lives from you know, a job as whatever it might be, to not just a job here, but again, we're talking about a career. And the reality is, everybody, and I mean everybody in the industry, complains about they can't find good people. There's such a skill shortage all the time. And this is our opportunity to do something about that and actually create a program that allows people to not only benefit from this training, which is at no cost to the candidates, but then also give that back to the local community, the local tech community, and make these job opportunities for them. And one final point, if I may, before we move on, is that, you know, we talked about diversity a few times, and first of all, I just want to say I think this is the first tech panel I've ever been involved with that's got more women on it than men, which is amazing. And you know, getting women involved in tech is such a huge priority. And what we're actually finding is going to people outside of the traditional university system has actually allowed us to look at more diversity, because I think, again, I think Ross or Rosie mentioned it earlier, there's such a inherent belief that a degree structure in tech is very aimed at male people. And you know, you go onto any comp science course across the country, and I'd be very surprised if you've got, you know, more than 20% female representation on there. So I think the other thing these sorts of programs really open the doors to are things like are different diverse backgrounds, which is massively critical for the growth of this industry as well.
Thank you, James. And you're absolutely. Yesterday, Ross was with me. We were doing a whole session. We had a whole day yesterday on Tech for All, talking about EDI and inclusivity and diversity. And you know, if we're recruiting, we have to recruit from the whole population, not from, you know, 40% of it. And with only 19% of females in tech, we do have a major issue. So, you know, we've got to get employers to open their eyes to the whole population. And, you know, some of the issues that affect some of those people that aren't able to come through the traditional routes. So, you know, we've got vast swathes of, you know, women returners, people who, you know, may be disabled, not necessarily being able to physically get to places, but the whole world is changing now with regards to work. And, you know, the ability to remote work should be able to be far more inclusive for that whole population. So I think, yeah, all of these points need to be taken into account when you are recruiting. But likewise, from a candidate's perspective, the opportunities are there. It's just a question of, you know, what we have to do to bridge that gap between those that may be tech curious and those where the opportunities are. And we have to accelerate that bridge so that people can get into the industry a lot faster. Rowena, I'm going to come to you, because this was something which was recognised within FS&P and, you know, part of the background to the data science programme.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, the employers are crying out back in 2018 and for, you know, people with data skills, and even more so now, and that's just going to increase in the future. But I mean, obviously we deal at graduate level, but my personal view is that degrees as they stand at the moment are not going to be sustainable. because exactly what James was saying, the technology changes so quickly. At the end of 3 or 4 year degree, where you've racked up £42,000 worth of debt, you're having to start in a workplace and start from scratch again. So I really think that moving forward, there needs to be a shift towards very shorter, sharper combination of academic study and work experience. I really feel that's really important. But also in terms of school leavers, I think there's a gap there. So, for example, my son is 19. He's just finished his BTEC Level 2 Digital Technology at Crosskeys College, and he's saying, "Oh, what do I do now?" So, you know, we're looking at, right, let's get you on the Kickstart scheme. Let's get you in through the door, and let's get you sort of, you know, training and perhaps look at an apprenticeship thereafter. So there are different routes in. You know, and I was just making some notes now, you know, in terms of people wanting to change their careers to get into the industry. You know, I know the Welsh Government have got personal learning accounts. So, you know, have a look at things like Data Camp, Coursera, Udemy, you know, do some self-development in these areas, maybe find yourself a boot camp. So I do think there's a lot of different routes in, but I don't think it's set out anywhere. And again, maybe there is a need for the Careers Wales to have a specialist tech element in it, where it's got the whole picture in terms of wherever you are, whatever level you're coming in at, there is a route in. And I do think there needs to be a bit more work there. But there's certainly some stuff now. And, you know, the techno camps and Institute of Coding in Wales websites are certainly worth a look at as well, for particularly females looking to break into tech.
Okay, thank you. Shannon, if I may come to you. So in your current role now, can you tell us a little bit more about your current role and, you know, where you think your core strengths are compared to what you thought you necessarily had coming through your graduate route, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I agree with a lot of the things that people have said in terms of like my degree and stuff, because I learned a lot from my degree. I really, really enjoyed it. So this is not me putting it down because it was fabulous, but actually even the things I remember from my placement year and the things that I've learned in this first 6 months, I feel like I've learned a million times more than what I've actually learned from going through one module in my first month of university, then moving on to a completely different module. I can barely remember what my first module is, so I do agree with what everyone's saying about that. Yeah, so I thought that my core skills originally were, I knew I was always hardworking, but I thought I would be going down like a creativity route. I knew I sort of like the tech side to things, but I think just like going with the stigma, I was like, yeah, I'll go down, you know, the creative side of it rather than the rest of it, because, you know, that's the natural thing to do. And whenever I was sitting in my lectures, I would sit, one of my modules sat within the computer science, like the outer group, and there was a boy, I would say 4% girls in there. So yeah, it'd be brilliant to see more girls. But in my opinion, the reason, like, I think more people, I came from a grammar school in Northern Ireland, and I feel like at the level before you're picking your subjects, that's whenever they need to start talking about tech and stuff, because only whenever I got to university, I would say, did I start to hear about we need more girls in tech, and that's when I got really passionate about it. Yeah, so the career that I'm in at the minute is with Principality Building Society, and it's I'm a customer insight analyst, which is all based around analytics. It was like a complete double whammy for me in terms of this course allowed me an one into data science and two into the finance sector, because really I had no experience with either. So it's allowed me to learn from scratch the whole industry and everything I need to know about that. And then again, working alongside my academic qualification has allowed me to put the things that I'm learning in university straight into work. So whilst when I was doing my bachelor's degree, I was learning things, and, you know, 4 years later, I might, now I need to put that into work experience, but I've forgotten it by then. At least with this, I've got this boot camp at the start to give me like the core fundamentals, and then as I'm going through my work experience, I'm learning something, applying it, learning something, applying it. So it's definitely like 10 times more an effective way of learning, I find anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. I think what I'd like to, I want to try and sum up some of the themes which are coming out of here before I come to you individually for your own personal advice for people watching today. And I think, you know, I hate to say it, but I've been an HR director for too many years, and these issues are not going away. You know, I've been banging my head on this wall. It's got to be 30 years now. And what I'm finding is right now, the issue is just accelerating. You know, the skills gap is going to cause a significant problem for our businesses, and as a result, our industry, and as a result, our economy. We have to be able to accelerate the development of our people far quicker than what we've ever been able to do before, particularly because the industry is moving at such a fast rate. So the traditional routes in terms of, you know, the education system, and we know that there's a lot of change going on with new curriculum reform. And we are seeing, you know, within that curriculum reform that digital will be a fundamental stream throughout it. But we still have FE, we still have HE, and those are, you know, those are the traditional routes that people will go through and people will choose to go through. And we have to think, and I always talk about this with regards to influence the influencers. And if we're looking at young people particularly, we have to be able to get the message across to not only their schools, their teachers, but also their parents. Because, you know, parents, particularly if they're paying for it, will have a significant influence on where a person's, you know, a young person's career is going. So, you know, those are the sorts of traditional routes, and there's a lot of work that we can be doing on influencing those influencers. It's also about the image that we create for tech. And as James said, you know, it's nice to see so many females on. If we are not putting out the right image as an industry, then we will never be able to attract, you know, the diverse, the bigger pool of people that we need to be coming through. So, you know, that secondly is still, you know, major consensus that we have to be able to address. But some of the things that you've picked up, you know, for the audience particularly, is one, you know, it's opportunity. The opportunities are there. So wherever you are in Wales, the opportunities are there within, you know, the tech industry, which, as we've said, is applicable throughout all sectors of industry and the economy in Wales, whether it's public sector or private sector. In terms of the skills that one is looking for, you know, from employers, it's also very much individuals being able to demonstrate good team core skills, good ability to think and problem solve, but also that ability, you know, we all have the stereotype of, forgive me, the geeky tech, all right? But what we're saying is, look at the entrepreneurship, look at the networking and the communications and the connections that you need to be able to make, because this is where the skills that you are developing, those core skills, are going to be absolutely fundamental in developing your career, because it's not, from what everybody said around the table, it's not going to be a motorway route. You are going to go along some A roads, some B roads. You may decide to go up a farmyard before you come back and go on a super fast track. So it's understanding that there isn't a pipeline. You know, it is very much about going through different networks and opportunities to build your career. So I'm going to come on to coming back to you individually, really to be asking, and your personal advice. You know, you can talk to the audience now, whether it be young people, whether it be people looking to change their careers. You know, I hate to say it, I've got a teenage son, getting him out of his bedroom. You know, what's going up in the bedroom? You know, a lot of that, people are exploring their own technologies. They're working on this stuff. You know, they are far more tech literate in terms of what they're doing in their everyday lives, whether it be TikTok, Instagram, whatever. You know, they're building websites quicker than I could boil an egg. It's fascinating. So what's your advice to these people on how they're going to embark on developing their careers? So I'm going to start with Shannon, because she's the first one who's just doing that, if I may.
Yeah, for me, personally, the big thing for me was getting any type of work experience possible. Even my part-time jobs have helped me so much in terms of what everyone's saying here employer-wise is they would employ people who are resilient and who have good team working skills. Well, I built that before I went to uni by just getting involved in so many part-time jobs. And then the real benefits of my placement was actually recognizing where I wanted to go with my career, because there's a million different options and a million different job titles, and you have no idea what even these job titles mean. So yeah, just getting as much work experience as possible so you actually know where you want to do and build up those core skills.
Thank you, Shannon. Really, really good advice. Rowena.
I think I totally agree with Shannon. I think, is get your foot into the door. If you're not from a tech background, get your foot in the door of a company that they may have opportunities to progress into a tech role. The other thing I would say is to, make the most of the free online learning platforms to, so start doing a basic course in Python, start looking at programming, get involved in some of the websites where you can do sort of coding challenges, things like that, and then start talking to the people who actually work in tech. I think it's very easy for me because I know exactly who to go to. I appreciate that the audience may not have that luxury, but you've got some people around the table here today you could reach out to on LinkedIn. I'm sure would be able to help. So I think those are the key things for me is, just get your foot in through the door, do some self-development, and then look for some qualification that can help you apply into the workplace. And that all shows a real willingness and a passion to work in technology.
Thank you. James, can I come to you on that?
Yeah, sure. I've got a few. So the first one, which is easier said than done, I know, but it really is to reinforce the message of not feeling overwhelmed if you're thinking of a career in tech, regardless of what age you are. If you've never been involved with tech before, for years there's been this feeling that there's a magic box that goes on, and only people who can decode it understand how to work with it. It's not like learning the piano. To become a concert pianist, you have to go through multiple different grades to get up to that level. You don't have to catch up all these years that you missed. So whatever age or part of your life that you choose to start a career in IT, you can quite easily open those doors. The other thing I would say is you can't buy experience, regardless of what I've just said. So understand that when you go for a job in IT, once you're at that point where you're looking for opportunities, what employers are looking for is the passion that you have for that career choice that you've made. So get involved in your local communities, your local meetups. There's never been more choice for things like local meetups in tech, in agile, in DevOps, in whatever it is. Get yourself an account on something like GitHub and start contributing as much as you possibly can to open source, even if it's just commenting on what's there. The more people can see that you're interested and passionate about a job in tech, that's going to take precedent over what you've been doing in your past up to this point. And one more piece of advice I'd like to give, if I may, and it's more aimed at the employers. We cannot simply keep complaining about skills gaps if we're not going to do anything about it. We can't keep creating these opportunities for young people and inexperienced to have a career in tech if employers are going to continue looking for these unicorns that they want to pay ridiculous salaries to because they've got 20 years experience. We have a responsibility in industry as much as the academic institutes have a responsibility. We have a responsibility in industry to make these opportunities and employ these people and invest in them and give them the chance that they deserve. And we're going to win for doing that as well. So we have to start taking action and employing these people. Otherwise, obviously, we're just adding to the problem.
Thank you, James. Very quickly, Rosie, because I want to come to Ross to finish, and then I want to just sum up, please, because there's some really, really good points coming out today.
Yeah, of course. And my piece of advice is really simple, actually. If you've got an interest in tech, even if, we've talked about backgrounds and how they may not be representative of what you're interested in. I think, Shannon, you talked about that with your background, and then actually you found a passion for it through your placement. let people know. You know, if you're in school, tell your teachers, tell your careers advisors. You know, if you're at university, there are societies for everything. You know, there are so many communities out there, you know, that you can let people know and make yourself known, you know, really similar to what James was saying. And then the second piece, if I can just slide a really quick second one in there, is don't be afraid to look at companies that you may not think are traditionally technology companies. You know, you may think, oh, I use Tata Steel as an example because I can. You know, it might not look like a technology company, but when you look at what we're offering, we really are, you know. So don't be afraid to also approach companies that, you know, you may not be aware of, but actually there's probably a huge community like we have here in South Wales, that are doing really forward thinking and technology based things, and again can bring people in from a lower level, from an apprentice level, or even, you know, it doesn't really matter what your qualifications are as such, because we've got a lot of in-house training and a lot of skills. So, you know, don't be afraid to approach companies that you may not originally perceive as being technology companies as well.
Thank you. Ross, finally, before I sum up.
Well, just to say, all the advice is brilliant, actually. Everyone's from the panel has brought forward. So yeah, absolutely that. I think what I would say is that you don't have to be an expert in technology to get a role in doing delivery of digital services or in technology itself. There's a role for everyone. The experiences that you've got in life are as valuable as the ability to do a particular technical skill set. I learned something called Prologue many years ago. It's completely useless now, but actually what it taught me was how to think about things. And so it's the experience rather than the hard technical skill that has value. And as everyone said, if you're interested and you're curious, and you'll find ways of exploring your interest, and as long as you can find a really good way of presenting that to any prospective employer, then they'll definitely be listening.
Thank you ever so much indeed. Really good insight and advice from my panel this morning. I'm going to try and sum up some of the things that have been said there, and particularly from the advice which is coming out at the end. It's first and foremost, as for those people who may be looking, is go and find out about it. There are lots and lots of different ways and different avenues. You know, go and do the self-help, go and do the self-discovery. I think that's the first piece of advice. Secondly, you know, understand your previous experiences. Look at how those previous experiences and the skills that you've learned within those can be totally transferable into this new world that we're looking to join. You know, in terms of the core skills of communication, of thinking, of being able to work in teams, we all do that, but we forget about it sometimes. Those are things that you need to be putting forward, and that passion. You know, demonstrate that this is something that is of real interest to you, because, you know, as James said, the gap is only getting wider. We as employers have a major role to play in helping to build that whole talent pool. We can't keep fishing in the same pond. We have to grow the pond. I don't know if you can grow a pond, but we have to increase the size of the pond. And we can only do that realistically, collaboratively. And I think, you know, as we're understanding through Wales Tech Week that tech isn't about just tech companies, all of our companies are requiring people with some form of digital technology, insight and background. We need to come together as a collective. And what can we do as employers to look at how we increase that overall pond? We've got the traditional routes through FE and through HE, and we know what they teach. But the speed with which this industry is moving is highlighting the need that there needs to be something new. There needs to be something which can move at the same speed with which the industry and the technology itself is moving. So what can we do collaboratively? And James has given a great example of what they're doing there with AWS and the boot camps. What else can we do in terms of being able to provide, as Rowena said, those short, sharp, insightful opportunities, tying in with what James is talking about with having the opportunities with the employers at the end. So, you know, I think that there is much more of a discussion that can come together there to actually provide some of those solutions, because at the end of the day, employers need to be taking responsibility for developing their people. And what we understand with this industry specifically is that is a continuous journey. because the industry and the technology is moving so very, very quickly. So on those notes, I'd like to say congratulations to everybody that's got their GCSE results, and I hope you've got what you want, and likewise with the BTECs and the A-level people coming out. So congratulations on that. And don't worry, if you didn't get what you want, you can always change career. Okay, so don't ever be put off by thinking that's the end. You're only a young person. There are lots of opportunities ahead of you. A huge thank you to Ross, Rosie, James, Rowena and Shannon. Thank you ever so much indeed for your time, and thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching. Rewatch all of our sessions online. Thank you to our partners,